During our time together over the last year or so building the RBZ, there's one question that I get more than any other, and that is, how much did it cost to build the RBZ? So today, I'm going to give you that answer. All right, so I have built this car over a period of a year, maybe more, and in that time, there's been a lot of different purchases. I need to put this into two separate categories. When people say, how much did you spend? This number of 30,000 comes to mind because I think of the car through the entire process. But that's not the realistic number for you. For that reason, I'm going to keep two totals. Over here, I'm going to keep the total of all the parts that you're going to need. And over here, I'm going to keep a total of all the stuff that I believe you should also do and or I did for the swap. But to give you a baseline of what I've spent on this project so far. So I bought the car. It's a 93 300ZX. I bought it for $4,100. Really, the thing that attracted me most to this car was the cherry interior and the fact that it was already black and a 2+2. It had some rust in the back. Clear coat was sunburnt on it. So I spent another $5,000 doing paint and body, and that's how we got to the satin black color that we have now, and all the rust was taken care of. In addition to the paint and body, I spent another $3,059 refreshing the exterior. New weather stripping, new cowls, new lights, new fixtures, new trim, new seals on all the windows, even the piece in the middle of the T-tops. I mean, everything on the exterior is brand new. I also refreshed a little bit of the clutch and the brake system, and that was about another $324. And then I did some suspension goodies and upgrades, and that was about another $717. Before the project started, bam, that's that number. Okay, let's talk about the things that you have to do. Obviously, you need an engine, but we'll get to the engine. The number one thing you're gonna have to do is modify the Crossmember. That's the same whether you're putting a TueZday, RB, RB25, SR. Every Crossmember has to be notched. All of those engines are front sump oil pan. Let me also preface by saying I live in Hawaii. I'm gonna pay a lot more for goods and services than you are if you're on the mainland. It is what it is. So when you're building a car like this, sometimes you just have to say, you know what? I don't care how much it costs. I just want to get it done, and I want to get it done right. For modifying the Crossmember, in order to have a shop that actually put in the plate steel and welded it all together and reinforced it the way I need it, that was $400. Now the cost may vary, but $400 is what I spent to have that done. In order to mount the RB26 or RB25 into the car, you're going to need a set of McKinney motor mounts. Those sets go for $550 on their website. Speaking of which, I happen to have a second set of McKinney motor mounts. So if any of you are looking to do a swap, I'll give them to you half price. In my research, I found that the front sway bar would not clear the oil pan. According to McKinney, you can use the stock sway bar if you're using the RB25 or the RB25 oil pan on the RB26. I'm still using the RB26 oil pan. We'll get to that a little bit later. I needed a custom front sway bar, and I got that through St. Louis Speed and Sound, and that was another $400. One thing you're gonna definitely have to upgrade, unless you're going from a TT to a RB, 2J, whatever swap, you're going to have to upgrade your fuel pump. I chose to go with an OEM twin turbo 300ZX fuel pump. That was $312. In order to still be able to wash your windshield, you're going to need another windshield washer tank. The piping that you have to run for the intercooler will get in the way of the original washer tank. I paid $44 for that. In our other category, I went with a smaller battery. This allowed me to have more room for catch can and everything over in that corner, so I paid $200 for a 21-pound Braille battery. One thing I'll say is at the end of all this, I'm going to give you the total cost of what I paid in shipping. The total that we're running over here right now, that's without shipping. I'm going to include it at the very end, and I'm going to freaking blow your mind because it's ridiculous, okay? Now, the engine itself. I went through JDM Florida. Great group of guys, great communication. They actually gave me a video of them doing a compression test on the engine before I got it. I got the engine, transmission, it had a clutch, flywheel, the entire wiring harness, boost control, ECU, all the accessories were on it. Basically like it was pulled straight out of the car and put on a pallet and shipped to me. I got this RB26, an R33 RB26, mind you, $4,200 is what I paid for this engine. And with shipping, it came over $5 grand, but again, we'll talk about that later. Good peace of mind. One thing you want to replace is a thermostat. You could get a cheap thermostat anywhere. I went with a Nismo thermostat that was $80. If you're not going to use a catch can, you need to refresh the PCV valve. 20 bucks for an original PCV valve. Unless it's an N1 Nismo RB26, the engine comes with water-cooled oil cooler. If you want to change that to an air-cooled oil cooler, you're gonna have to get a sandwich plate adapter. I went with the Greddy Grex sandwich plate adapter. It also required a raw brokerage oil filter stud and the oil filter itself from Greddy. So we're talking $113 for the plate, $12 for the stud, $15 for the oil filter, and that will allow you to run an external oil cooler, which I highly recommend. If we want to talk about necessary things to the engine, there's one thing you're gonna have to do. You got two choices. Mock up an RB25 oil pan to your RB26, which I really don't recommend doing that. It's just as easy to take the stock RB26 oil pan and modify it. All you got to do is cut off the differential housing. You pull out the axle from the center of it. You got to shave some heat dissipation fins off. Get a shop to weld those axle holes shut, and you're gold. You're done. They not only made custom plugs for the two sides, but welded the aluminum and everything like that. $400 for the welding. In your local area, it might be cheaper. You're gonna need air filters. You can go dual MAF, and if you do that, you're gonna increase your cost and you're gonna increase your difficulty. You could go ahead and use the ECU that comes with the engine. If you do what we're gonna talk about a little bit later, and that's an aftermarket ECU, then you can go map sensor, and all you need is 2 air filters. Now, I chose to go with HKS mushroom filters. That was a total of $170 for those 2 mushroom filters. And then, of course, I needed couplers for those, about 48 bucks on Amazon for the right couplers to mount up all the air filter stuff to the turbos. If you chose to use that Greddy oil plate sandwich adapter, you're gonna need an external oil cooler. I went with a Mishimoto 19-row oil cooler. It was $158. And I got the lines for it, which were $135. The lines came extra long. I think they were 5-foot lines, and I just trimmed them to the exact size that I need. That pretty much concludes everything for the engine. So let's talk about the extras. Let's talk about the insurance for the engine. When I get an engine, no matter what it is, I always rip it down and put fresh gaskets, and that's exactly what I did. So a full Cometic gasket kit was $329. Also, I went ahead and changed out the oil pump to the Nismo N1 oil pump, and that was $265. And while I was at it, I did the N1 water pump, and that was $221. If you're gonna be doing all that stuff anyway, you might as well put in a fresh timing belt. So the timing belt tensioner was $51, the timing belt idler pulley was $44, and the timing belt itself was 45 bucks. And I went with a genuine Nissan timing belt, not with the Greddy or whatever. I think the Greddy ones run about 90. The biggest piece of insurance that you're gonna get, ARP head studs, which is exactly what I did, and that was $238 for a set of studs. I also installed stainless steel oil and water lines on the turbo side. I went with the Kawanga, I think, lines. That was about $90 for all the lines. I bought an extra piece of insurance, a new harmonic balancer, a Ross Tough Bond harmonic balancer that can handle the high RPMs that the stock one can't or probably shouldn't, and that was $480 for that harmonic balancer. On top of that, I went ahead and upgraded my exhaust manifolds and my dump pipes to Tomei manifolds and dump pipes. Manifolds were $711 and the downpipes were $531. Again, you don't have to do those things, but it's what I did. Additionally, I put thermo blankets on the turbine side of both turbos. I used Thermal Zero blankets. Roughly cost me about $160 for the 2 blankets. I also installed the dual catch can from Radium Engineering. I bought secondhand. That was about 500 bucks. And in order to run that catch can, I needed to have custom AN fittings for the actual valve covers. I bought those through raw brokerage. That was 42 bucks for those fittings. Now, that's the total now that we're at with all the elective stuff. Here we are with all the stuff that you need so far and what really logically makes sense to get. So moving on to the next thing would be the intercooler system. This engine sits so far forward, there is no way you could put a radiator inside the engine bay. The radiator is going to have to go into the front nose area of the car. That said, you can't do an option like running a mid-mount intercooler because you're just not going to have the room, because that's where your radiator is going to be sitting. So you're going to need to run a front mount intercooler. I bought this intercooler probably about 8 years ago. I think it's made for an S14, S13 maybe. I'm not exactly sure. I bought it through CX Racing. It was the intercooler and some piping, if I remember correctly, and it was about $159. In order to achieve the plumbing, I found this really cool kit on eBay. Just some generic pieces of pipe that were 3-inch in diameter, and it came with 2 straight pipes, 2 90 degrees, 2 45s, 2 60-degree elbows, and all the couplers that you needed. I think it also came with all the hose clamps as well. That was only $100 for all that pipe, and I was able to cut it and use it and match it up exactly the way I needed it for my custom application. I would recommend to prolong the life of your turbos, you install a blow-off valve. I installed a Blitz Super Sound blow-off valve. I spent $209. That's about what you're going to spend on any blow-off valve. It's all up to your individual preference in the way you want it to sound. I'm more of a whoosh and less of a whistle. I went with the Blitz. If I had to do it, I would go with the Apexi twin chambers. Those are my favorite sounding blow-off valves, but they don't exist anymore. And to weld up the blow-off valve flange onto the piping, about $150 is what they charged me for the welding, so there was that cost there. Keeping with the theme of plumbing, let's talk about the cooling system. The radiator that I went was the biggest one I could find for the exact dimensions in the nose of the car without having to go V-mount. Came with an aluminum shroud and a Spall high-performance fan. It was made by C&R Racing. It's a dual pass radiator. It was $650, but again, that's the radiator, a shroud, and a fan together in that package. The one thing you don't get is the actual necks on the radiator to connect hoses. Buy those necks for the size of hoses that I was going to use. That was another $48. The hoses, I had to source them locally through a local store, just random hoses that I found in the back of the parts store. Of course, I don't have the receipts on those, but I think it was roughly $40 for radiator hose. That's another thing. The radiator that I bought is a closed system radiator. There's no radiator cap or opening on it at all. Since the radiator sits significantly lower than the engine, all the coolant would just rush right out of the cap. So we have to be able to fill the coolant system at a higher point than the engine itself. So you have to have a coolant expansion tank, which is what we placed in the back of our engine bay by our battery. And that was roughly about $78 and about $45 in the fittings required in order to plumb it up. And the last thing that you're going to need when all that pressure builds up inside your coolant system, it has to go to an overflow tank. I use a Moriso overflow tank. It's plastic, and that's about $38. You can get it through Amazon. So we're about halfway there in our build now, and this total, it's not ridiculous. Nothing really came from eBay. Everything was kind of sourced, name brand stuff. If you did source off of eBay or some of those other cheaper companies, you could probably save a couple bucks or two. For instance, do you need HKS filters? Probably not. Can you do with some eBay filters? Probably yes. Moving on to the transmission. If you bought the engine from the same place I did, you got a transmission with it and a clutch. Unfortunately, in my case, well, fortunately, unfortunately, attached to my engine was an OS Gilken something twin plate clutch. After further research, now that the car is running and going, I think at some point I can go ahead and install that clutch. But I went with the information that was available to me at the time, that I needed a stock RB26 flywheel and a high pressure NA Z32 clutch disc and pressure plate. So that's what I did. The RB26 flywheel, I actually bought that used, came with a Nismo clutch. I probably could have used that Nismo clutch, but again, I went with the information that I had. It was $200 on eBay, man. But the transmission that I got was a pull type transmission. I needed to convert it to a push type. And to do that, all you need is an RB25 clutch slave cylinder. The places to mount it already exist on the RB26 transmission. You just gotta tap and drill the holes and you're good to go. The slave cylinder was right about $46, and the NA clutch, I just happen to have in this car already a DXD South Bend Stage 4 Plus, and that was about $425. You can reuse the Z32 clutch fork. However, I chose to upgrade to a Z33 clutch fork. We'll put that over here. That was $96. To build the transmission, you needed the Z32 transmission, so if your car is already a manual, that's a freebie. And you need the RB26 bell housing. If you got the engine like I did, that's a freebie too. I would recommend at this point, replace all the seals and everything inside your transmission. Basically, you're tearing all the seals and everything out of it anyway. So about 87 bucks is going to buy you all the gaskets and seals that you need to refresh your transmission to new. As advertised, the McKinney Motor Mounts kit does not require any modification of the transmission. However, we've seen that needed to happen. All I had to do was have a drive shaft shop take out a little bit of my drive shaft. That cost me $98. We'll put that over here because that was needed. I didn't have an existing clutch line system, so I needed a one-piece stainless steel clutch line to get from the master to the slave clutch cylinder. That was $39 through Concept Z Performance. We'll put that over here. Maybe your car is already a 5-speed. Now let's talk about exhaust system. We already talked about how I upgraded the manifolds and the downpipes, so we're not going to cover that. That's already over here. But what you are going to need is the RB26 Y pipe that connects the two downpipes and puts it into one exhaust pipe. This is one of those things that I bought off of eBay because I knew I was going to cut it up. I was going to bang it up because at this point, the exhaust really was experimental to see how it would all work. Now that I've got it working, I'm going to go back and I'm going to build a better custom exhaust. But for the sake of getting the swap done and getting it going, you can buy one of those Y pipes off of eBay. I paid $144. You're going to need a Z32 catback exhaust, particularly one with an X pipe. I just cut the top half of the X off, and then that's where we put the joiner, so it acts as a splitter. Back in the day, bought cheap exhaust off of eBay because I knew I was going to hack it up. Bought good mufflers for the catback and the mufflers all together. I spent $500, and that was for two MagnaFlow mufflers and a catback exhaust system, $500. Now, when it comes to all the piping in between that Y pipe and the X pipe, I bought all the piping I needed from Summit Racing, and I built my own exhaust. 45-degree bend pipes, flanges, gaskets, 18-inch resonator, and a Y joiner. All of those parts together were $276. And then I spent another $150 renting a welder to actually put it all together. Doing it myself, I saved a ton of money, and I didn't have to pay for a tow truck or any other stuff to get my car to a place. And the last thing we're going to talk about is engine control, man. I originally had a perfect Z32 harness and I had a perfect R33 RB26 harness, and I planned to make my own. But after more consideration, I ended up buying a harness from Wiring Specialties, and I paid $699 for that harness, already custom made for an RB26 in the Z32. Some significant benefits in buying this harness. One, it's all brand new wiring and brand new connectors. Two, it's specifically ran in such a way that you can tuck all the wiring. Number three, the PTU, the power transistor unit, or also known as the igniter chip, sits on top of the RB26. And Wiring Specialties wires their harness to be able to put the PTU inside the car next to the ECU in the cabin at the feet of the passenger side. Additionally, they also wire the harness so that you can put the drop resistor inside the cabin as well. So you're taking those two elements that are very sensitive to the heat and you're getting them out of the heat and putting them in the cabin. For $699, man, there's a lot of value in that. Not only to mention that, but I actually took my Z32 harness and I took my RB26 harness and I sold them on eBay for roughly $150 a piece. So out of that $699, I got $300 back. We won't take it from the total, but that's just a recommendation. You're going to need a drop resistor because you are not going to get a drop resistor with your engine kit. It's something that's mounted in the engine bay, but it's needed for the engine. It doesn't come with the engine itself. A drop resistor can be had many different places. It's $98, definitely required. The boost controller for the engine, we're using the original boost controller, boost control solenoid, not the actual boost controller itself. So that's a freebie. And if you want to have gauges, it's completely up to you. I do recommend a boost gauge. I spent $78 on a boost gauge because, again, my car didn't have one inherently. And I think that's kind of an important buy. So $78 for that. You're going to have some wiring, some relays, some clips, some clamps, etc., etc. So let's just say roughly $150 for all your just generic wiring and other accessory shrink wrap junk that you're gonna need. The engine comes with an ECU. You can use that ECU, but you're gonna have to use MAFs, and you're gonna have to use RB26 MAFs. Unless the ECU's been reprogrammed to use Z32 MAFs. But the engine doesn't come with MAFs. So you're going to have to source those. So those are additional costs. Additionally, you're going to have to think about things like boost control, electronic fan control, continuous upgrading and expansion of your project, mass airflow meter sensors versus manifold pressure sensors. And for that reason, all of those things considered, I went with a Haltech ECU. Now the cost of the Haltech ECU was $1,501, but the benefits seriously outweigh it all. We were able to wire our radiator fan into the Haltech and it's all electronically controlled. Boost controller and the Wideband O2 sensors. We were able to run a map sensor because the Haltech ECU has an onboard map sensor. That gets rid of your mass airflow meters altogether. All you do is run a vacuum line inside your car and actually connect the vacuum line to the computer itself. You have unlimited tuning opportunities and upgrade for the rest of the life of the car. So it's really a small price to pay when you add all those costs. I think $1,500 really is worth it. Now, I mentioned Wideband O2. That's something we should have mentioned in the exhaust. You can run with the stock O2 sensors that are in it, but we'll put the Wideband over here. So $235 for the Wideband O2. I think I went with it's the UGO Wideband O2 with the inline controller from AEM. That way we can wire it into the ECU. It doesn't come with a gauge, but it's all controlled through the ECU, so nothing to worry about there. And guys, that is pretty much it in a nutshell. Now, sitting here, I'm not exactly sure what this cost is. This has kind of been good for me because I've been able to see, like, holy cow, like, it's really not as much as I really play it out to be in my head. But at the same time, it's not cheap either, man. I mean, there is some significant cost in a project like this. You just have to be careful not to get hung up on the cost. This cost right here and the peace of mind that I have for this cost right here, you can't put a price on it, man. If you want to be satisfied with everything that you're given and trust what you got and you never knew where the real origin was, here. If you want to just do some preventative maintenance, give yourself a great peace of mind, this is the price that we're going to be looking at. Now, living on Hawaii, shipping, man, holy crap. This was kind of eye-opening to me. I always try to look for the best deal. Sometimes the best deal doesn't always come with the best deal on shipping. Anytime I could buy a part through Amazon, I did because I'm an Amazon Prime member. And I'll tell you what, I'll even include the Amazon Prime membership in this because I definitely think it's worth its weight in if you're going to do a project like this and you're in a situation like mine. The overall cost of this project in shipping to me was $2,158. $2,158 in shipping cost. Now, this number I gave you is not shipping. This is just parts. I paid an additional $2,158 on top of that in shipping. Now, 831 of that was the engine itself, but still, holy crap. Oh my gosh. Eye-opening, man. Eye-opening. So yeah, guys, that is it. That is the cost of an RB26 swapped 300ZX. It's about as basic of a rundown as I can give you. I'm pretty sure I covered everything. If I forgot anything, please leave it down in the comments. Ask any questions that you want to. There are also little cosmetic things that I've done over time. I didn't factor any of those things in. The costs are still building up, right? So we did the entire fuel system. We're about to do the cams and the cam gears. And guys, I've got a set of turbos sitting in my checkout cart at a particular store, about to push the checkout button. I'm thinking that's right about 4,000 more. 4,000. I'm going to eventually rebuild the exhaust, even higher flow, 3-inch pipes out of the turbo dump pipes to a 3.5 or 4-inch pipe. It'll be bigger back at the mufflers as well. I just want to kind of open it up just a little bit more. Projects are never ending, guys. Never ending. Anyway, I hope it was informative. I hope you learned something. Thanks again for tuning in. I know this was probably a little long, a lot of information to put out there. And hopefully now you guys got your questions answered. If you saw on Instagram, I've already tore out all the fuel system stuff. Now it's time to go back in reverse, and that will be happening the next time we're together. So until then, ciao a tutti and aloha. Bye-bye.